Hey, how's it going everyone? Brian here with another Java game programming tutorial. So the last time we left off, we implemented a load feature. So you can see my gorgeous map that I made last time is still here. I can continue working on it whenever I want in my leisure time and hit S to save it. And by some voodoo magic, it is now even more beautiful. So we're going to shift gears this time. And instead of working on the levels and the editor, we're going to implement something that we probably is long past due at this point, and that is some basic collision. So the way collision works is we kind of already did it in our UI class. Here we're kind of checking, like, in a sense, if the mouse is colliding with the button to see if it's clicked or not. It's a little different because the mouse doesn't have like depth, you know, like a width and a height, but our collision is going to look really similar to this. Like, make sure it's over the X, but not too far. Over the Y, but again, not too far. So make sure it's on top of the button. So for collision, we could do this a few different ways. We could make like a collision method in our enemy, and in our projectile, and our tower, to see if in each of those circumstances they're colliding with whatever they're supposed to be colliding with. But instead, what we're going to do is go to our artist class, and we're actually just going to make a static basic collision method that we can then call from our various classes to see if one object is colliding with another object. So right above our draw quad, which we don't really need this anymore, but I'll keep it here for sentimental value, we're going to make a public static boolean, so it can only return true or false. True as in it is colliding, and false as in there's no collision. Check collision. And usually we'd have an X and a Y and a width and a height. But this time we're checking two different objects, all right? And neither one exists inside of the artist class. So we're gonna have 8 floats here, all right? So get ready. X1, and at this point you might be able to guess what the rest of the 7 floats are gonna be, but just follow along here. Y1, width 1, and height 1. And then I'm gonna return to the next line here and continue with X2, Y2, width 2, and height 2. So these are all the coordinates for 2 different objects, right? Object 1 and object 2. So now this entire method is actually just one if statement. So we're going to say if, and make sure you get this exactly how it's written. If x1 is greater than x2 plus width 2. There's a couple different ways to like order this these operations, but x1 is greater than x2. No, that's not right. If x1 plus width 1 is greater than x2, and x1 is less than x2 plus width 2. I'm looking at it, I think that's right. So now we do the same thing for the y. So if y1 plus height 1 is greater than y2, and y1 is less than y2 plus height 2, then return true, as in there's a collision, and otherwise we will return false. And that's our entire collision method right there. I'm pretty sure, it's like when you have that many variables, I'm pretty sure this is correct. We'll test it and we'll see. I might need to change 1 or 2 things here, but I think this is good. So let's go to our projectile class here, and that is where we're going to test our collision method first by saying in our update method, first we need to make a new boolean for our projectile class. So private boolean alive. And we have that in the enemy class as well. It's just to tell if like we need to keep updating and drawing the bullet, or if it's already done its job and there's no use in like worrying about it anymore. So in the constructor here, we are going to set alive right under the target. So right here, this dot alive equals true, because every bullet will start alive, most likely. I can't imagine a situation where it wouldn't, but every bullet will start alive. And then when it hits a target or when it flies off the screen, it'll become unalive, I guess, using our terminology. So in our update method, let's go ahead and call that check collision method we just made and pass in a x, a y, width, and height. I don't believe we have a width and height yet. We don't, so we need to add that. And then for the second set of variables, that'll be our target, which is what we're trying to hit. Dot get x, target dot get y, target dot get width, and target dot get height. Make sure it's not health. Dot get height. There we go. And if that is true, for now, we'll just print out something that says the projectile hit its target. You could say whatever you want there. We're just testing to see if our collision method works or not. So let's add this width and height variable. I guess so far we did a temporary fix where we just added 32, 32, but we should be cleaner than that. Up here after the x and y, let's add a width variable and a height variable. And instead of our constructor, after the x and y, add float width and float height. And then inside of the constructor, say this dot width equals width, and this dot height equals height. So now we have an error somewhere. Right here. Did I not put enough parentheses? I knew I didn't. Did I put too many? What's going on here? Oh, that was so silly of me. All right, we need to put this in an if statement, obviously, because right now we're just calling this method and it's not, yeah. So just say if, and then put a parenthesis before that, and make sure you have the appropriate amount of parentheses after that, which should be 3 closing parentheses, and that will work. So we're checking if there is a collision, right? Because check collision will return true or false. So we're saying if a collision is true between our projectile and our target, then say the projectile hit its target. But first, in our tower cannon class, because we changed our constructor, we added a width and a height, we need to go there and update the way we make projectiles. So we have our texture, our target, our x is all this, all this, and our y is all this. So right before 900, just put 32, 32, adding 2 arguments there. And so that way, you know, we can make different sized projectiles, because before it was like hard coded in, like every projectile will be 32 by 32. And that's obviously not the case, because some towers might have, you know, arrows, and other towers might have ballistic missiles, or nukes or whatever. So it's obviously going to be different sized. So let's try it out now, and let's see if my collision method is correct. I'm hoping it is. Let's run it. And remember, the towers will only shoot the first enemy of each wave. So let's go ahead and play it, and it should say in the console here if there is a collision. So let's see. It worked! Cool. I mean, obviously it worked, but it worked. It says it a bunch of times because, just like our mouse clicking used to be, if you remember that, every time the game updates, if the projectile is currently colliding, it'll print this out. So it's not just like a one-time thing, because we're not killing the projectile yet. We made that a live variable, so we can actually test that out in our projectile class. Instead of printing out something, we can just set alive equal to false. So the bullet did its job, the bullet exploded or impacted or whatever, and at the top of our update method, you could say if alive and put everything else inside of that. So I just put the opening bracket and the closing bracket, and then if you hit Control-Shift-F, it will format the code inside of it. It'll indent it for you. So let's try that out now. Let's see if that worked. We go to our play, and this time the bullet should disappear when it hits the target, which it does. Perfect. So that is some basic collision. What we'll want to do eventually is kind of get rid of this. This is kind of like a shorthand, just testing version, and we will want to make sure the tower cannon does not even bother updating or calling the update method on bullets that are not alive anymore. We'll like remove them from the projectile list. But for now, that is pretty good. So we got some basic collision with this awesome method right here. We're going to use this a lot. And next time we'll probably work on towers targeting different enemies and stuff, because now that we're actually hitting the enemies, we want to like make sure they can adjust their aim and shoot at new targets. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.